All right, let's get you more on this rhino poaching story. We're joined by Tony Carnie, who is the Daily Maverick's environmental writer. Tony, what a heartbreaking story.
Yes, hi Michelle, it certainly is.
And even more heartbreaking, I suppose, is the fact that, you know, the really center of where most of these rhino killings took place, the Hluhluwe Imfolozi Park, 65% of these 499 rhinos were killed in the park. And all the while, there was this hole in the fence of that park.
Yeah, I think the issue of the patchy and dilapidated fence is important in that it increases access to the park. Doesn't explain the escalation of poaching in that park, but it's certainly an indication of the poor state of management of infrastructure within Hluhluwe Umfolozi. But I think for some context on how rapidly this problem can escalate, if you look at Kruger National Park, 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, that park had about 12,000 rhinos. It's now down to about 2,000.
Wow.
So, you know, that biggest larder of rhino horns has been severely depleted. And that is one of the reasons why poachers are not targeting the KZN reserves and Hluhluwe Umfolozi in particular.
Yeah. When did you say we had those 12,000 rhinos, Tony?
This was about 15 years ago. There's always been a low level of poaching in South Africa over the last few decades, but it kind of really exploded in 2008. From there onwards, previously there were maybe less than 20 rhinos killed each year across the country. And then it suddenly went up to 200, 300. By 2014, there were 1,500 rhinos being killed nationally.
Wow.
That's just simply a completely unsustainable figure. It's now dropped to 500, but that doesn't mean necessarily that poaching has decreased. It's simply a reflection of there's far fewer rhino to be poached, and so poachers have to work that much harder to get what they want, and inevitably they look for the weaker spots, and unfortunately it appears that KZN is that weak spot.
Yeah. And I suppose that's why I asked you about the dilapidated boundary fence at Hluhluwe Umfolozi, because, you know, it speaks to our level of urgency in dealing with this problem, doesn't it? Because we're in a state of emergency now, and we have been for some time insofar as our rhino population is concerned. Are we seeing that urgency in the steps that these various national parks are taking?
Well, I think in this particular case, if you're looking at Hluhluwe Umfolozi, as Umbrella, the conservation agency in charge of that park, has gave some details of some interventions that it's making. The first of them being the fencing. But, you know, fencing has been kind of a disaster area for almost a decade in Umfolozi. There's been contracts that have been issued to close the gaps, and it's just dragged on and on. And now, last year, after the national government provided over 40 million to fix the fence, that was announced in May last year, and that money hasn't been spent. And one of the reasons for that is that local business forums wanted a big cut. and that apparently has been resolved now. But there's other issues as well. KwaZulu-Natal is a huge park, 97,000 hectares. And yet there's only 55 field rangers as of last year. One of the interventions has been to increase that number, and there's now apparently 88 field rangers, including people who've been transferred from other parks. There's a new rhino security manager who's been appointed. We're not quite sure who that person is yet. But there's also issues like poachers work mainly at night to try and escape being seen, obviously.
Yeah.
But what emerged yesterday during the briefing by the minister and Ezimbelo was that, in fact, Ezimbelo did not have night capability for its helicopters, and that apparently has also been rectified now. But it's kind of indicative of the fact that it hasn't been treated with the urgency and the resources necessary to address this escalation where poachers have moved from targeting Kruger to this province.
Yeah. I mean, if things continue in this way, Tony, how much time do we actually have left with our rhino population? Well,
I think rhino numbers and reserves are normally not disclosed for security reasons, but with over 350 rhinos being killed in one single reserve, the biggest one in KZN, it's only a matter of time before that number gets severely depleted. And the thing is, almost 65% of rhinos now in South Africa are privately owned, whereas before the state owned the majority of those rhinos. So I think that there will still be reserves with rhinos in them in the future, but I think primarily there will be private reserves, and that's fine. But for the public to be able to enjoy their heritage, I think visiting a private game reserve becomes unaffordable for the majority of the citizens to access their own natural heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony Carnie, let me thank you for your time on this Wednesday afternoon, the Daily Maverick's environmental writer, as we continue to track this worrying story around rhino poaching and the fact that more than 60% of all cases in 2023, that's 499 incidents of poaching took place in a park in KwaZulu-Natal.